Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs Podcast, where innovation meets sustainability. Building a better tomorrow today. We interview changemakers and visionary leaders redefining success for the planet. Here you'll find inspiring stories and solutions that matter. Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs Show. Today is Krystine McInnes, CEO of Athena Contracting. Krystine and her team at Athena Contracting are on a mission to create transformative, sustainable housing communities that serve both social and environmental goals. Athena's developments are unique, incorporating organic agriculture, art, and community programs to enhance the lives of residents. Today we'll learn more about Krystine's journey, the challenges of balancing private and social venture goals, and her vision for building communities that increase residents' quality of life. Welcome, Krystine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you here. I'm excited to hear more about Athena Contracting and the impactful work that you're doing in sustainable development. And if we can, we'll start with an overview. Athena Contracting has a distinct mission to blend community and environmental impact. Could you tell us more about what inspired you to found Athena and what drives your focus on holistic housing projects?
Yeah, so I started out a number of years ago in the early 2000s with a company, a partner of mine and I had. And one of the first projects we did was this, big 4-story building. And when we were finished building it, I was kind of staring at the building being like, my God, this is going to be here for like 100 years. And it just really hit home for me how important it was that we do things sustainably and that we're really thinking about the long-term impact of the things that we're building and creating. Because once it's constructed, like I say, it has such a long footprint. And so it really just was important for me at that time to really be thinking about, sustainability and how we could do things with as little of a footprint and as beneficial as possible for the residents that were going to live there. And then if you go back to the early 2000s, green building and sustainable technologies were like really in their infancy in a lot of ways, at least in North America. And so you kind of had to be your own like engineer, and you had to really like fact find with these technologies to kind of figure out like how they worked. And so I just kind of went on this like crazy rabbit hole of like trying to understand, solar and geothermal and wind and like how all these systems integrated. And as I kind of continued to go down that rabbit hole, it became very clear to me that the integration of these things was really important. So that was like a really, really important key, but also, it wasn't enough to just build sustainably, that the like power benefiting communities was so important. So the integration of urban agriculture, the ability for people to, basically not just like live in a house and then go to a grocery store and, pay with their access dollars for fruits and vegetables, but like be able to create kind of more of like an ecosystem around your home. So it just kind of started with this like, wow, we have this crazy responsibility. We need to be thinking about things sustainably. And then it just evolved down this, as I kind of got further and further down this rabbit hole of like, what does that actually mean? And then how can we maximize the benefit over the long term of the footprint of this project, not just for the building sustainability, but for the long-term sustainability of the individuals that are going to live.
I so appreciate that. That really feels like an encompassing view. I think a lot of times people can fixate on the features, the solar panels, the eco-friendly materials, and then there's more that like the landscaping, the food, local, and we'll get into everything else too that goes along with these homes that really take care of the residents as well. And speaking of, you integrate urban agriculture, art, and community programs into your developments. How do these elements support the overall mission of Athena Contracting?
Yeah, so it was kind of the same thing, like diving into this problem of, what it means as a developer, what the responsibility really is in what we're creating. And so that kind of lens of looking at like what the problems are in housing, like how unaffordable housing is, but how unaffordable life is, and like how difficult it is if you're an individual that needs affordable housing, as an example. So you need a subsidized form of housing because you just can't afford to live based on what your income is. But there are often a whole host of other things that follow that. So often those things can be lack of financial literacy, like not knowing how to change your economic circumstance, or like what a credit rating is, or how to like change your economic environment so that you can be more prosperous. So that is often something that comes with the need for affordable housing. Isn't just a single thing. It's like there are all these other things that come. Another item on that list would be the inability to afford the rest of your life, like having to choose between paying your energy bill or paying your food bill. That's like a common phrase that people in like affordable housing use. Like people have to make this choice. And it's like, okay, if we're going to construct projects that want to, serve these individuals, then we really need to be thinking about dramatically lowering the cost of living for them, not just with housing, but also with energy, with food. Transportation is another one. Like these are kind of the big elements that like take up the majority of a person's income. And so out of that came, this integration of like programming. So thinking about, we integrate like financial literacy, a really cool program through a company called Enriched Academy, and they're like the #1 financial literacy training in Canada. They do amazing work. And they have, a course you can go through that really just helps you like educate yourself about investing, about credit ratings, about, how to get to that next level financially and like really build yourself up. Things like we started integrating things like, I call them like a rental rebate program or a strata rebate program where individuals in the housing community can participate in, general building maintenance that we would have to pay for anyway, either the strata or the rental management would have to pay for those items. So if you're paying for them anyway, why not credit the individuals that are living in the building with rental credit or payment credit for doing that work? And then we thought about too, like integrating technology around that. So you would have like an app that's part of your community. So individuals can rate the performance of the people that are doing that work. So as an example, like janitorial work, like you need the carpets vacuumed and the garbage cleaned up and what have you. Let's say you have, 10 spots available in a month where 10 residents can participate in that program. They're going to get a rebate towards their rent for that work. So a rental credit or a strata payment credit. And then the other building residents, everybody can vote, they 5 stars for that individual for the work that they did. So you have this kind of internal management system to make sure that the performance is matching the expectations of the community. And you also have an incentive from the individuals to want to do a great job because, of course, they want to get that 5-star rating. And so things like that are like very low. They're not capital intensive. They're just being smart about how we're allocating resources and doing it in a way that's going to maximally benefit the resident. So now, if I'm struggling to pay my rent, I have an opportunity that only requires my time to then offset my rental payment. So we started looking at programs like that. So yeah, just like really thinking more smartly about how we're managing the building as a whole so that it is far more holistic, and then like thinking always about reducing the cost of living of the residents as kind of like the #1 goal of why we're integrating programs like that. So yeah, so that's the programming component. And then the art and design, like for me, it's like, it's important that we have beautiful spaces. And like, I think that often goes extraordinarily underestimated, especially in like social housing or affordable housing. Like they're just slapping up these boxes with as minimal effort towards design as humanly possible. And they're horrible. I mean, you walk into a lot of these places and you just think like, how depressing to live here. And the idea should be how inspiring to live here. Like you should be connected to nature. You should have art and design and like beautiful works of art around you. Those are not capital intensive. They're care intensive. You have to give a shit about what you're doing to create an environment that people are going to feel is really inspiring for them. And like what that does to a person's confidence, sense of self, pride of place, all of these things are just like so critical to how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about life and like the sense of hope that we might have and like what our future could be. I mean, all of that kind of stems from our environment. So that's where the art and design comes in. It's like, that is like, I think a very often overlooked and very important factor in how we live our lives and our ability to see a future and a possibility of a positive future.
These are some high quality, I almost would want to call them golden pillars that I feel like you're embodying here. Yeah, just really taking taking a lot into consideration. I love to hear about the program that gives residents an opportunity to participate in lowering the cost and just being involved in that way. You're taking on the cost of living, you're taking into account social impact of these individuals and giving them some more connection to where they're living. Beautification, yeah, an inspiring place to live. That's not something that I've heard brought up very often in the even the green building space and consideration a lot of times. Sometimes, but most focus is on materials and energy efficiency. Yeah, this is inspiring for me to hear about the considerations that you're putting into place here.
Yeah, and like the urban agriculture, that's something that for me was a big, I really noticed like in my own personal health a major turnaround when I moved to organic produce. And so having had that experience myself, knowing how important that is, and just like the ability of people to get their hands in the dirt, to be connected. I mean, most people have no idea where their food comes from or what goes into, creating it. And that's another, like, it's like these things that maybe have, they don't have like dollar figure ROI attached to them, but they have like significant like value in our daily living. And so the urban agriculture, it serves a number of purposes, but one of the main ones is obviously to lower the cost of living of people's grocery bills. So great, we can grow food on site. That food can be, distributed to the residents. Extra food from that site could be sold in a farmer's market or sold to local restaurants or what have you to lower the cost of the building management or maintenance. Fostering community, like just having your hands in the dirt, being in the garden, you're connecting with other people that are out there where maybe you normally wouldn't be. Maybe you'd be, siloed away in your little unit and not like connecting and integrating with your community. And just the benefit of like physically getting your hands in the soil, getting your feet on the ground, like it just can't be overstated. It's another one of those like very overlooked but extremely high value things that is just so simple. Getting back to those roots, like the benefits for people with depression, anxiety, ADHD, sleep, like all these things, just being in nature, working the soil, getting your hands in the dirt, and then like having those benefits kind of ricochet through the individuals that are living in that community.
Gospel of contracting. I feel like contracting almost even doesn't just hearing it doesn't seem to represent the full breadth of what y'all are really involved in. That's a lot, really. I get into the core, the people who live in these homes, like how we're really serving them. My hat's off to you. You're doing great work.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and I think like I know that for myself, like these are the things that are important for me in my life, right? Like these are the things that really help me to feel like positive and grounded. And so, I mean, I again, like reflecting in the own mirror, it's like, well, if these benefit me, then if I extrapolate that out, right, like hopefully that would benefit many as well, because there are all these intrinsic benefits to the things that we're talking about. Everything I find in development and in construction is very siloed. It becomes very like matter of fact, dollars and cents. I think that it's a mistake to think about housing that way because it is so integral and, so many other things. And that, like we all know this, like if you've been in a space that is really inspiring, you feel different, like you look at the world in a different way. You have a different reverence for nature. And when you're in a really like terrible environment, like it affects your mental health, it affects your perspective, it affects your attitude. I mean, all those things are true. And so, yeah, that's kind of the core of like our philosophy. And I hear you, contracting doesn't really sum it up. And we probably are overdue for a bit of a name change.
I mean, for me, it's just like it's almost, yeah, the wrapper is just kind of like, all right, working again just in what might come to mind at some of the projects, the kind of materials, and then just to hear all of the nuance of the persons that you're taking into consideration in these different impacts. It's much broader on the inside.
Well, and like what I found with these green technologies is like a lot of them are just greenwashing. It's like geothermal is a really good one. I, was touting geothermal as like this amazing solution. Well, we have a geothermal system and my energy bills are actually like extraordinarily high. The electricity bill is just totally, out of touch with reality. And so the idea of the system may work in certain conditions, but it isn't a problem solution for everybody. And so like until you really dive into a lot of the detail around how these systems integrate and what environments they're best for, a lot of people just slap a system in being like, oh, great, we can now call it a green, technology or throw a solar panel up and like, oh, problem solved. But it doesn't really work that way. it's very like site specific, condition specific, and like, so many different things kind of integrate to impact whether or not that is actually a sustainable solution over the long term. And like, is it economical? So those things all have to kind of come into play, and it isn't so easy. But I think one of the things that like is a major danger, we see this all the time. It's like when people like clear cut a site, build a building, and then like slap some solar panels on it, like not ideal. Integrating with your environment is so much more impactful, like including the trees, including the system that is, sorry, Kelly has them. Well, actually right on the still right behind you. So again, just back to kind of like thinking about things as a holistic system. It isn't just clear cut a site, throw up a building, slap a bunch of solar panels on it, and now we're green. It's like, well, okay, if we had kept those trees, we had a far better R value on the building because we're not exposing it now to like blinding heat all day. If we think about using pervious materials in the paving in the parking lot, we're avoiding a heat dome, which is a major issue. Like just all these little things that can really help to kind of balance out and create more sustainability and in the site, and not just kind of greenwashing the building, which we see a lot of. I'm sure you've seen a lot of.
Yeah, this is something myself I'm very interested in developing. I'm actually going to be going to Costa Rica this winter to study eco-villages and learn about some of the materials, but also just the whole incorporation of how people are gathering and living amongst one another in community settings as well. But yeah, the personal practices as well as the material practices. So I love to hear what you're doing. Almost like sign me up. I'll enter.
I know. It's really fun. I've been designing this new project right now, and one of my big integrations on it is like a vertical forest. And so the idea is there's one that was done in Milan, Italy, that is kind of like the first, at least very publicized generation of this. It was called the Bosco Verticale, and they did this kind of vertical forest. So cool. First of all, visually, it's really, really beautiful, but practically as well, like it reduces the energy consumption by something like 10% because you have natural insulation now, you have natural air conditioning in the summer, and you have insulation in the winter, and like all these benefits the habitat of, flora and fauna in the region. I mean, it's just really, really cool. So it has like a practical benefit, but it also has like such an aesthetic benefit. And it's like going back to, the use and utilization of natural materials on the exterior and facade of a building. Like, I mean, these, concrete jungles with black rooftops that, it's ridiculous. And just a little bit of care. Another thing we're looking at, which is really, really interesting and unique, is like these moss walls. And this is a newer technology. You can actually paint this stuff on, and it like same thing. It's just creating. It's definitely better for more humid environments, but you're actually like creating now a massive insulating wall that's also like incredibly beautiful. You can design these in different templates. So, just things like that can make just such a huge difference, that don't have to be so costly, and also just actually do something rather than just greenwashing.
Maybe I have to connect you. There's a fella, the product is called Smart Walls, and he's pushing it's recycled materials. They're doing growing of microgreens and other things there that you can be doing, recycling the wastewater. And so, yeah, it's a modular. Their like ability to implement is it's just very fast. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like 3 or 4 times faster than regular construction timelines. And so, I'll find his contact info to share.
Yeah, I love that.
I love hearing about people. That's what I'm hoping to do with this. A whole brand and concept, New Earth Entrepreneurs, is how we're connecting both broadcasting, sharing stories, but then just also helping connect people to help further their missions and projects, and positive, not even just sustainable, but regenerative, good projects that are helping make the world a better place.
Yeah, it's a different way of thinking, and like unfortunately, it's very difficult to kind of find alignment with like some of the external agents that you need in order to build a building or build these kind of concepts, like your municipal support, government support, because some of these things are, even though they're like from an engineering standard, they are, sound, they're still new. So, or new to perhaps that municipality or, that particular region that you might be dealing with. So it's complex and it can be very like time consuming, but I think it's really worthwhile to see it through because we just can't be doing what we've been doing for the last 100 years, like just slapping buildings up, creating these massive footprints and creating just like giant heat domes in cities and all of the things that are coming. We have to be thinking about things more holistically. And as we've talked about before, housing is so unaffordable for people. It's like, this is ridiculous. Like, we can't continue to live in this vicious cycle of like trying to work so hard and then spending all of our after-tax money, then trying to pay for the things that we need in order to live. And like, really, we're just surviving. We're not thriving. Where I think we can create community in this way where we're all thriving, where you're keeping more of those after-tax dollars in your personal pocket to then build the future that you want for yourself. You're not just paying the energy company and paying the grocery store and doing all these things where every dollar you spend has less and less value because, you're just constantly doling it out. We don't have to talk about the rate of inflation and all the things that are making it harder and harder and harder for people, to start that business they've always wanted to, or to take care of their family in the way that they want to, or, travel or see the world, all those things, like they become further and further away, the less and less of those after-tax dollars we have in our home bank account.
You're preaching. It's like having my heart and mind into a new person and your own project doing. I'm like, this is great. This is exactly what I want to be hearing about people involved with, and more of this happening, and people getting connected with. Because, yeah, as great as, again, it's just like a core of what the conversation, as great as materials are. There's just so much that we can be improving upon for quality of life. For people and the planet. Love to hear this. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, just outside, and so we have this kind of intersection. We just got hit by Hurricane Helene, or Tropical Storm Helene, but it was the most, it's huge devastation. It's already a month after, and still it's just, by and large, systems are coming back online, but it really, for me anyways, woke me up just to like some of the things that really just aren't sustainable, and what, like, different housing, a lot of trees that have been cut and made for soil erosion happening more quickly in those land, and so we had over 1,600, maybe even over 2,000, I don't know the official numbers, of landslides that happened in the area. And it was just like, yeah, there's so much that if we can build better infrastructure, that's and we have a lot of housing affordability issues too with our homeless populations and things like this. So you're just like really at an intersection. This area that I live near anyways is just highlighting, showcasing, and there's been more natural disasters that I've been seeing happening. There was one in Spain, I believe one in Paris as well, of flooding. And it's like almost kind of the, in my lifetime anyway, some of the prophetic nature of saying climate change is coming. Like we're right at that tipping point. And to see some of these, like what was almost prophesied or just projected was, once in a century. The flooding that we had here in Asheville was once in 1,000-year level of flooding. So it's just kind of like broadcasting even more clearly the importance of how we are creating settlements, creating our lifestyles to be either in harmony, or if they are continuing, like, past 100 years and however long have been just out of a way that's really going to be both sustainable for the people and the planet. Depending on your time, I got questions, because you've faced significant challenges over the past 7 years with natural disasters affecting your projects. And
we can read the Bible on the whole natural disaster thing. Yeah, and that's one of the things that's like, like I feel like there are, like, as you're living your life, there's problems everywhere. Everything's problems. But there are certain problems that call to you, that like tell, that they just say like, this is my problem to solve. And this is one of them for me, is like, this feels like a problem that I can solve. And just all those life experiences that like feed into like why I feel like this is a problem I can solve, and one of them is just the number of natural disasters. I think we went through 3 wildfires and 4, like you just said, 3 of them were 100-year flood events, and the last one was a 1,000-year flood event, which is like, we got to stop saying stuff like that, because this is like 1 every 3 years, 1 every 4 years. Like, this is now, so being able to have some sense of self-sufficiency. And I don't think that involves like moving into the middle of nowhere and living in a bunker under the ground. Like, there's lots of examples around the world of amazing projects that, have reduced flooding, that have had all these like major benefits for the environment There's this one guy in Kenya I love. Oh my goodness, what's his name? It'll come to me. It's a really cool story. This guy, there's a documentary made about him. Anyway, they took this barren land and they turned it into a farm he does a lot of like housing for street kids. And so they had put all these street kids and they had this basically an orphanage and turned it into school. And I mean, it's just amazing work that they've done. But not only that, like through building the farm that they built, they have created more rainfall in the region, which was basically an arid desert. They've decreased the temperature by a number of degrees specifically within that pocket because, you're no longer having that heat dome effect. You now have all this canopy of trees. And I mean, it's just amazing to see like how this barren piece of land became this incredible ecological wonder. And like that's happening all over the world. It's just thinking about these things in a bit of a different way. One of the projects near where I live now, we've just been like looking at it going, it's just ripe for landslides. Basically what they did is they came in, they clear cut, 20 acres on a hillside, threw in a bunch of rock, okay, great. Yeah, some drainage ditches. And I was like, less than 5 years, there's going to be a major catastrophe there, like guaranteed, because you've gotten rid of all of the soil structure, just like you were saying, right? You've now eliminated everything that was holding that hillside together is now gone. You've put in a couple of like landscaping trees that are going to take years to establish a root system, and we're getting heavier rainfall. So those things combined is just a recipe for disaster. So anyway, yeah, I do think this is like a problem everywhere, but in these local communities like mine or like yours, these are problems that are calling to you in a certain way to say like, I might be able to solve this in some small way and contribute in some small way to kind of a larger, more global problem.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely be interested to see if there's any future collaboration opportunities here because you really are living in a way that's, just helping put into practice a lot of, the problems that I'm wanting to help address. And so we'll love to, find out how to either help further your mission with this and find out, if there's ways that how I can plug in or help plug you into other resources. How's your timing? Because I've got 6 or 7 other, no, even more actually. But I want to check because this was right about the time that we talked about.
Yeah. Keep going. I've probably got another like 10 or 15 minutes. If that works okay for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple ones. Funding, major hurdle for Athena, and given your unique position between private and social ventures, could you share more about how you're addressing these funding challenges to support high impact projects?
Tell me about it. Yeah, it's really challenging. Government has all of these initiatives, which is amazing. So it's not to like, crap on our government, because I think it's great that they're realizing there's a problem. They're trying to activate programs to address that problem. But innovation and government are not things that usually go together. And so it's a real challenge because a lot of the things that they are looking for, you have to really speak to their specific programs. So you need to cater your project in a way that it's going to fit, like a lock and a key with what it is that they're looking for. And that's not always the same interest. It's difficult. They're slow. They're extraordinarily slow. If there's an election, you're hooped. Because, they shut down basically a few months before and a few months after. And if the government changes, you could actually lose that program. So, for as much as they are attempting to solve a problem, they are very, very slow. They don't pivot quickly. The programs are very clunky and, they take a really long time to activate, which doesn't work with the private sector, which is like quick, all focused on, rate of return. If you're taking 2 years to get a project launched, it's like, oh my God, the private sector is not on board for that. So that's a real challenge. And then the private sector, ROI, number one, like what are the numbers? And it's like, well, the numbers, do have to be there. You can't build a project that's not going to stand on its own 2 feet financially. So it's great to have bold ideas, but you need to actually make those ideas financially viable. So that is really important. But from my perspective, it's like we have to be thinking about planet, people, and profit on an equilibrium. Like those 3 things have to have value. So not just the bottom line, but also the bottom line for the people and the planet have to be included in that equation. And so it's really tricky. You have to have investors that are willing to kind of see the benefit. There's also like I believe that if you create a beautiful space that is affordable and really contributes to the longevity and the health and well-being and quality of life of the residents, it will always sell. And so that for me feels like that's a no-brainer. But you also have to prove that. So, you're often talking to investors that just care about slapping a building up and what's my return. You're not talking to people that have that same vision that you might have, right? Or that same understanding of how like these things aligned connect, right? It might not be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It might be like 1 + this + this = 5. It's very, very tricky to find that like right alignment. So I've been kind of working on like all avenues, like between the nonprofit sector, the government sector, and the private sector, and just trial and error to like find these right, fits and alignments, and get buy-in from those different agencies, and then figuring out, how do they work together. So yeah, it's been a lot of failure more than anything. Like just like, okay, I've got this one project I've been working on for like the last like 2 years, and just struggling to get it together. Like we've got a nonprofit, we've got government agencies, we've got some government programs. Like it's like, oh my God, this thing is just an administrative nightmare and a lot of delays. And you also are dealing with like, I didn't think about this. I naively went into this thinking, oh yeah, everyone's going to, support because they have a mission that says they'll support these things. But you have these boards, these governance boards with a lot of these agencies, and those boards are filled with personalities, and those individual personalities have their own agenda. And so there's a lot like coming into play when you're working with either the nonprofit sector or the government sector, because you need more than just going to them with a project. Like you actually need to get buy-in from those boards. So, there's some like relationship building and understanding of the competing, often sometimes polarized interests. For example, if you have a board of a nonprofit that also has a developer on that board, they may or may not be in the business of wanting to send that business to their friends, which is like not legal or what they're supposed to be doing. But that's pretty much why they're on that board. And like, so you really need to be aware of who you're dealing with, what their actual interests are, and then how that like filters through the agency that you might be working with. And like, that's a lot of work and a lot of politicking, and very challenging. It's just, funding is always challenging, but trying to do funding in this way is extraordinarily challenging. So, yeah, you just have to have like a really high threshold for failure, like a willingness to just like keep going at it, and like just trying to find that right combination of parties that you can kind of work with to kind of build a deal.
It helps inspire me some with the idea. Well, I've got some ideas for how to help connect people. Like the green financing is something that keeps coming up for these projects. That, yeah, how is it that they can really gain traction and get the support that they need that isn't always tied up with the government bodies and the bureaucratics, the red taping. So yeah, I won't spend much of our time mentioning on it, but it does inspire because that's something that I'm wanting to help is put together the essentially kind of like nodes that people with the projects and the support for the projects can come connect to, and then how to get pieced together or connected together. So that way, as a user, you could essentially sign on and say, here's what I'm doing, here's what could be helpful, and just also open it up for other people to say, like, here's something that I can offer to that. That might not have been in consideration, and just to help make that happen better, faster.
Yeah, like your shortfall is almost always your equity. So like you might have the land and you might have the financing, but you're missing that gap of like, okay, great, I've got the land, or I've, put the startup capital in, right? But then you have that next call because you're going to need whatever percentage of your own equity to build the project. And that's where the gap typically is. You can usually find a lender, especially depending on the loan to value. You can usually find a lender. You can usually find the government support, eventually, like once you kind of piece it together. But that equity gap is really challenging. And that's where like a lot of these government programs are trying to lower the amount of equity required, but you still need to have, that equity filled. And you're still going to have that cash flow call, right? Where you need to kind of like pay for things ahead of, or your building will stall out before your financing is triggered. And so that's always a bit of a challenge. So, but yeah, that's usually where the gap is like you've got that equity gap sometime between, your development permit approval and your construction financing start. That gap is always the most critical and usually the hardest to, put together.
Again, I've got plenty of other questions I could ask, but maybe just in the time that we have, a closing question. I'm curious, what excites you most about the future of sustainable development and the impact Athena can make on communities?
Well, I do think like one of the things, I mean, I love solving problems. And like when I looked at, the housing sector, like it would be really easy to build a bunch of luxury condos and, make my life simple. But, that doesn't excite me. It's actually quite selfish for me. Like it excites me to be able to solve a problem like this, particularly around like affordable, attainable housing, whatever that kind of segment might be. But, that's very exciting for me. And the ability to like have that kind of ricochet, to see people prosper, right? Like that's exciting for me too. So that and I do feel like because we have this housing crisis kind of across the board, like in like all of the Western world right now, we have major housing crises. That has brought governments to the table to say we're willing to kind of fund things, and they're actually far more open than they've ever been to seeing, these kinds of projects move forward. So that's exciting for me too. So I do kind of feel like that trifecta of like, oh, wow, these are complicated problems that require like dedicated people that really have a passion to solve them, because they're not easy and they're years of commitment. But that's all very exciting for me. I like complicated problems. I like complexity, like I like things that are like, just out of reach, that like once you kind of accomplish them, you feel that sense of like, yes, I really like that took a lot of effort and a lot of time, but was really worth it. So that is like by far, it is very selfish for me because that really fills me up and like, I'm just wired that way. Whereas, building some luxury condos and selling them off to people that already have more money than they need, I don't know. It's just not exciting. It's just not, that doesn't, turn my lights on the way that something like this does. So that I do feel very excited for the future. And crisis is always opportunity in disguise. So I also think like, we may not have had this opportunity, or it would have been a lot harder to get these projects off the ground in a different climate than the one that we're in right now. So that's really exciting for sure.
Amazing. I felt this is maybe one of the most inspiring of the conversations I've had so far, just in terms of alignment with the problems that I'm interested in seeing solved. Again, I love to see the different materials and things, but to have it put together in the big package of really taking into consideration the various ways that we're able to improve upon the individuals, planetary systems, how we're merging those. That's just so core to what I'm hoping to the problems, the puzzles that I'm working on. So love to hear about your contributions. Really appreciate you taking time to share some of your insights and the work that you're doing with Athena Contracting.
Yeah, this has been fun. I'm sorry about this. It took us 2 times to get it dialed in. So I'm glad that we were able to. And yeah, I mean, it is really exciting. Like also like the technology is getting to a place as well. Like I said, like back in the early 2000s, it was really clunky. Like, I mean, like you really did have to be your own engineer and like figure these things out. And it was very complicated. And now I do feel like there are fastly innovating technologies that are making some of these integrations a lot more affordable, but also a lot more efficient. And that is really, really cool because you can do a lot of this stuff. Like there's some really cool, like small scale wind tech that I've been fascinated with small scale wind for a while. And like I just see the complexities and the problems with it. But there are some really cool systems now that are very cost effective, but also very like high energy output. So that's like super, super cool. Where we're at with solar is really unique and interesting. But yeah, so I mean, I think all of this is like a very unique time to be innovating because of that technological revolution that, a couple decades ago was pretty in its infancy, but is now starting to get its stride. So I think we're also going to see a lot more innovation in that department, and that will be really fun to, implement. And I do think maybe this is just me being like hopeful. Like I'm a big fan of biomimicry. Like I think that nature does it best. We've been just putting these like ridiculous, man-made structures around and not really paying attention to like nature's right here, like showing us how to do these things and has been doing it for millennia. But seeing these new technologies like the wall moss, the vertical forests, I mean, this kind of move to even like passive solar houses, that's pretty cool too. Like that's really like paying attention to really ancient wisdom and integrating it in a modern way. And like that is very exciting to see. And I think we're going to see more of that kind of, I call it biomimicry. Maybe that's not the right word, but like really paying attention to how nature is already solving these problems and then finding ways to put like a technology around that. So yeah, fascinating time to be in. And you just want to do it right. Like that's the big thing. Like, so many projects I've been to where they tried to do something that just ended up just being a big nightmare for the people that lived in the building over the long term, right? Like a technology that didn't work so well. Like I was saying about the geothermal, like my energy bill is just insane. And, I have a green technology, which is really not that green. So yeah, just making sure that you do it right is, I think, really critical. And sometimes we only learn how to do it right by failing. Unfortunately, you never really know, but the hope is that you do it right and you integrate the right technologies in the right combination.
Mm-hmm.
My project is in.
Yeah, you're speaking again. One of the pillars for me is I call it almost like a techno village. It's the future merges with the past. I even heard recently about AI, artificial intelligence, but AI, ancient intelligence, and merging those two of, yeah, some of these technologies or the biomimicry, the ways that we've either lost or just don't practice things that the passive solar and just working more in tune with not clear cutting the trees, having the settlements just part of the ecosystem and in more of a balance, more of a harmony in that way. So yeah, that's the mission. Merge the worlds of this future pace and the technological innovations with the wisdom that is ancient or just it's sometimes called indigenous or just more of the like blended with the ways of living with the world in a healthy way for planet, people all together.
Totally, and I really do believe like if people have a beautiful environment that's connected to nature that is dramatically lowering their cost of living, they can then look out into the world and be looking at what could I create? How could I benefit others? Like we can't think about those things when we're literally just surviving, and like I think that is like critical, like that our foundation be solid, that we're stable, that we feel financially secure so that we can then look out at the problems of the world and think about how we might solve them and look at our environment and how we might take care of it. But we can't do those things when we're in fight or flight and survival and like just trying to put food on the table so we can live another day. Like that is, for me, that's no way to live, and we can do much better. And I think that we can solve a lot of these problems if we can lift people out of that kind of way of living to then see what potential they might have, or their children might have, or we would encourage people to have more children because they could actually afford to have children. So, all of those things like lead to potentially, the world we'd all like to see ourselves living in, but we can't do that if we're all in, survival of daily needs.
Yeah. Yeah, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physical safety, bottom, and then you can start getting into think it's connection, purpose, and then
Totally.
top being self-actualization, where you're not focused on am I affording to live and food and then that connection, the social aspect, like you've addressed, and getting people involved in the community, and then enlightenment or that kind of healthy
Totally.
healthy human state.
Yeah, totally. And like from the top down too, like when thinking about kind of our more elderly population, like one of the number one issues of our more senior population is isolation. And, that affects on well-being and all the things that kind of stem from that. And also a sense of purpose in daily living. And so those are things too, like when we think about building community, it's like, having community gardens and having programming that like encourages that integration, the sharing of that knowledge and wisdom, right? Like having that kind of, canning and pie making, and not saying that that's the only thing that seniors can do, but you know what I mean? Like the transference of that wisdom in a setting that just allows that integration between generations is really lacking and missing in a lot of communities. And so helping our more senior populations to be less isolated, like we address that as well, because you've got this kind of integrated community setting where, people are getting their hands back in the dirt, and we're creating programming around how we're living to help create those points of like social cohesion. You don't have to do it for people. You just have to provide the framework for that. And then people will fill that framework with, all of those skills and needs and their own love and energy, and, make something of it. But if they don't have the place, then, there's no placeholder for that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just living in a tiny little box with no patio and, never leaving your apartment, it's very difficult to feel great about your life, So
Yeah, beg to wonder what really that could be in terms of true fulfillment and satisfaction. I mean, there might be that kind of safety and security and yeah, having oneself taken care of, but I think over time, eventually, there's going to be those other aspects of contribution and feeling purpose. And yeah, you're getting into it's kind of almost like a spiritual practice of really taking care of one another. And I mean, you can relate it to biomimicry of people, and you consider almost like the trees of the network sharing effect. We're taking out all that old growth, the elders, and putting them somewhere else. And I remember taking part in the organic grower school here in Nashville. And one of the things mentioned was the agricultural knowledge that had once upon a time been just known amongst the population. 98% of people had agricultural knowledge, and then it went down to 70. I don't remember the exact years that it started going. The Industrial Revolution and people getting out of the farms and 70%, 50%, 25. It's down to 2% of the population having knowledge of how to grow their food or do some of these, self food preservation, medicine making, how to just take care of yourself.
totally.
A lot of those like natural skills, and yeah, that's huge for healthy humans.
Yeah, like I had designed a project. We actually didn't build it, but in the process of designing this project, we had designed a seniors facility. So I spent a number of years like really researching the seniors industry and seniors housing, and realized we were not seniors housing operators. It's a very complicated industry. It's a real business in itself. But what I learned was really like quite devastating was when seniors move into usually like some sort of congregate care, assisted living facility, their longevity in that facility is usually a maximum of 2 years. And the reason is that their health deteriorates so quickly on that transition that they are in hospice or passed on within that 2 years. And so we looked into like, why was that? And it was fascinating. The reasons why that was one of them is like the moving stress. So that stress of like leaving your home often that you've been in for, decades. And that's unfortunate, right? Like moving into an environment that you don't know that is not what you would have for yourself. But the other ones were really fascinating. Isolation, loss of sense of purpose in daily living, food, the food quality was so terrible. It's just, hospital food in these places or prison food. Like those are really solvable things. So, creating that, sense of purpose in daily living, high quality organic produce, and the sense of community and social cohesion. And then when I looked at that, it's like, well, those are pretty much the building blocks of like for everyone. It's just more prevalent in seniors because, they're at that kind of end of life stage and also are, very, very impacted. Cause like you said, we're one of the only like cultures that like takes people when they hit a certain age and just puts them in a box somewhere isolated and alone, kind of waiting to die. Like that is not reverence for our elders. That's something else. And so yeah, we're losing all of that wisdom, all of that knowledge, all of that care. I mean, nothing is like the care of a grandmother or grandfather. So I think there are better ways we can be looking at these things and having that social integration and multi-generational integration is like really important. Anyway.
Preach, really.
I've taken up a lot of your time, so I should probably let you go. And thank you so much for the conversation. This was really fun.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. This is no, these are again you're hitting core tenets and principles of my life individually. So yeah, again, one of the most rewarding feeling conversations of hearing somebody who's in the world doing really important work.
Trying. Awesome. Well, again, yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's been great.
Absolutely.